hundreds of ladies of high rank thronged to the place to try it on, but unfortunately in that time, as in ours, most of the ladies had the same foot size. Cinderella had regular feet like everyone else, so he was unable to determine which of these wealthy ladies to marry, and it was obvious that none of them was the beautiful stranger he met at the ball. The king's son fell into depression, and no medicine could cure his melancholy. One day, a rich countess arrived at the castle, holding a glass slipper. She pretended to be the girl he'd been searching for. In reality, she had just spent a fortune by ordering a similar shoe in the hope of becoming queen, and because she was the richest and most calculative artisans under her auspices, had completed the work much faster than others, even though many ladies had the same idea at the same time. Even so, the prince agreed to marry her. She looked pretty in her red silk dress, with her sweet little face. He then persuaded himself into thinking that the girl he'd met on the balcony had just been a dream, that she'd never existed, and that he'd be looking for a chimera. The countess' name was Angelica, and she had come from one of the wealthiest families in the land. Under her brown wig and angelic stare, there was a desire for endless power that could not be beaten by anyone. Quite manipulative, she took no time in completely controlling her husband, forcing him to buy her the most expensive clothing and jewelry. After marriage, the old king passed his throne to his son with relief. The prince was already completely disenchanted. Living in a kingdom was nothing close to being a piece of cake, and he had to satisfy people who never seemed to stop wanting without making any sacrifice. The slightest reform made him unpopular, and the crowd still screamed for change. After years of seemingly endless paperwork and crawling right under urgent problems, he eventually fell prey to limpness and just let his ministers govern the country in his place, as he feasted in the palace, digging a deeper hole in the country's depth. Like if nothing was wrong, his entourage continued to tell him how good of a job he was doing, assuring him that he was still an important and powerful character. The court continued its hollow ceremonies, and rich people drowned their cares in wine and debauchery during long, expensive parties. As the new king ate and drank so much, he became large and pot-bellied, lost his charm and wore makeup to hide from the eyes of all the aristocrats who had already noticed it. He no longer found comfort in his private life, as Angelica was making his life hard. Nothing was beautiful enough for her, and she often had fits to get what she wanted. On a marry him, the brunette was a cold materialist. She wanted and wanted, but nothing seemed to satisfy her. Looking for new pleasures to experience, she also began to seek new lovers. The couple had never really liked each other, so it took no more than 3 years before they jumped at each other's throats constantly. Determined as she was, Angelica decided their children's education, and the king could not say anything about it. Years and years passed, the last one seeming slower than the previous, crushing the king with weariness. Meanwhile, Cinderella led a completely different life. She finally found the courage to go against the will of her stepmother, who then kicked her out. The baker's wife, who felt pity for the young girl, took her in, shared it, and gained a strong passion for baking. Being young and pretty, she had also to endure the advances of the baker and had too much sincerity to open to his wife. Reluctantly, the baker's wife asked her to go away. Out on the street and penniless, Cinderella didn't give up for all that, and she crossed paths with a rich burgess, whom she sold her virginity to in exchange for money to open her own bakery. Okay, this is getting weird. Thanks to her tenacity, her business succeeded in a very impressive time. Soon, word spread all around the land, and in addition to the bakery, she developed pastry for the attention of the wealthiest customers. Business went well for her, as she managed to survive financial crisis without losing too much. She lived by herself, but she hired apprentices, whom she thought of as her own children. It wasn't rare for hungry street kids to approach the shop to try to steal a piece of bread, but should always recognize their eyes salivating with envy, and would rather offer them a chunk of bread in exchange for helping the bakery. Everyone knew her in the neighborhood and praised her for her commitment and vivacity. There were a few courageous men who dared to ask for her hand in marriage, but she refused each and every single one of them, saying she was not worth it. No one knew how to seduce her. Some say you can still hear her humming a soft melody on rainy days when everything is grey, days that have lost their magic. In her heart she had locked away the memory of her first love. Strangely, she kept the surname Cinderella for the rest of her life, even on the front of her boutique, so no one would ever know her true identity. Years passed, each one becoming happier than the last, infusing her a mysterious force. Nearly 50 years after the famous night when everything was started, the king was going to throw his last ball in celebration of the last of his children who was getting married. His eldest son had replaced him for some years now, and Angelica had died. To his great relief, she had gone long before him. He had the firm intention of disappearing in nature and drawing a cross on the hollow life that used to be his. The ball, I don't know why I keep saying ball, reminded him of memories that he thought he'd forgotten. On the balcony, just for a moment, he thought he saw that illusion again. She wasn't there, of course. How could she? She was only a dream. After all, just a beautiful dream. In a state of melancholy, he told the musicians to play his song, the tune of the lovely stranger. Was she a fairy? Why did she smile at him? So many mysteries that he would probably never solve. Wrinkled like an apple and bent with age, the old king disappeared from the palace after that final night. All he wanted was to end his life peacefully, to buy a small house far away, breathe fresh air in silence. He had planned everything. Plodding on the road with his walking cane, he had headed in a random direction, choosing his destination on a whim. He had gotten up very early that morning. The sky was fragilely everlasting. While passing by the shops, feeling a bit peckish, he decided to buy a piece of bread for himself. As he passed by a fence, he heard a hoarse yet charming voice, like a bleating lamb. It was the melody, the same tune, sad and happy at the same time. Curious, the old king stopped and looked around. In a small garden in the bakery, an old lady was sweeping as she sang. Almost unconsciously, the old man began to hum with her. Surprised, the lady turned to him. With her tired little eyes, she saw a silhouette peering at her on the other side of the fence, so she began to approach him with an affable air. "Can I help you? Are you lost?" She was an arm's length away like the other time, only the fence separated them. The old man recognized her immediately. Her faded blue eyes still had the same spirit, the same charm, the impression of coming from somewhere else. At a glance, he detected a dimple, a disheveled, weak, narrow clavicles. Under that skin, battered by time, beat a weakened heart, but it was always the same heart, one of a blushing maiden. "Excuse me, but are you? He asked with difficulty. She watched him, waiting for a sentence that would never be finished. He inhaled deeply. "I found you." She shuddered. A shadow of uncertainty passed over her nearly blind eyes as she stared at him. She held out her hands and gently touched the face that was offered to her. He came closer. She quivered. A burst of hope seized him. "It was you on the balcony that night, wasn't it? You do exist. It wasn't a dream." It was a dream, and like all dreams, it was short-lived. I still remember what an incredible coincidence to meet again, after all these years. Enchanted, she invited him in, and they sat on the bench. They had many years to catch up on together. She admitted she never was a princess, that she had lived all this time as a simple peasant. He sighed. He probably would never have been able to marry her in his father's lifetime. He also told her about how he had come to forget, how he had reassured himself and how that had failed, how he had been through the ringer. She patted his head gently with a motherly smile. He felt like he had been freed of all his burdens. Then he decided to do something absolutely crazy. He asked her for her hand in marriage. Cinderella's eyes widened and her face turned red. She was old and did not have much time left. Neither did he. so it was either now or never to finish their lives together, while they still could. The idea was completely absurd, and yet she said yes. With the money he had left, the old king organized their wedding. Even though she was in her 60s, Cinderella still looked beautiful. She had this little something unspeakable on her lips, like a stolen kiss. Her white dress suited her perfectly. She protested, proclaiming that she looked ridiculous, but deep down she was happy that she had found her dream. The village mocked them, but they did not care. They were perfect together. And then, is there only one age to love? They found their bodies a few days later wrapped in each other's embrace like those old trees that could not grow by themselves. The grey hair of the old lady was splayed all over the bed like a rain of ashes. Her skin pale, she rested against the old king, her hands at her side, eyes closed. On her finger her wedding ring shone. One would have thought they were just asleep if it were not for their frail bodies, if the open window hadn't been letting a whirlwind of autumn leaves blow into their bedroom. On the sideboard of the living room remained the glass slipper which Cinderella had kept as a symbol of their first encounter. They lay together, engulfed in an eternal dream, their impassive faces wearing the most beautiful smile that one had ever seen. Against the snow of being a high-statured beauty, whistlings of death and a circle of secret music made the adored body like a spectre rise, expand, and quiver. Wounds of black and scarlet burst in the super flesh. Life its own colors darken, dance and drift around the vision in the making. Shudders rise and rumble, and the delirious savour of these effects clashing with the deadly hissings and the hoarse music that the world far behind us hurls at our Mother of Beauty. She calls, she rears up. Ah, oh, our bones are clothed with an enormous new body, rainbowed illuminations. Alright, there was something, but I think it was creators. I must say, well, interesting turn of events. Oh, Marcel Weyers again. German translation. I mean, I didn't see that coming. But really great story. Changed it really. Someone changed the original in a great way. Really. But I don't have words to describe it. I liked it. I really liked the whole story. How it was changed. Yeah. And very original artwork. Being Beauteous. Great game. Hope you enjoy it. And see ya.